welcome for being here. We appreciate you. Today we are having a Rise Now forum, so we're honored to have you. My name is Dominic. I am the CEO of Rise San Diego, and thank you all for being here. Today is important because it is a continuation of programming that we have reimagined around civic engagement and what does it mean to put the power back in the people instead of the other way around. And so today is a second part to a four-part series. And today we're honored to talk about what does it mean to go from people to policy and all the things in between as it relates to advocacy and growing collective power together. And so we're honored to have a panel that's going to be able to speak to their experience around this work. And we have an amazing moderator who I'm going to pass the mic to now, Dr. Roxanne Kymaani, who's going to lead us through the panel discussion. And then afterward, we're going to have a presentation by Jacob. So welcome, everyone. Excited to have you here.
Thank you, Dominic. And hey, thanks, y'all. Thanks for taking time on your Saturday to be here. I know you woke up really excited to learn, to get into this cool space. So just want to offer some gratitude and appreciations for all of you. Today's conversation, as Dominic shared, is about how community needs become community action and how community action can become true transformational change. And we're going to explore where change begins, how communities build power together, how that power can influence the decisions and the policies that all of us are impacted and influenced by, and what it takes to sustain change across generations. So I want to encourage you throughout this conversation, you got some note cards up front, to think about an issue or a challenge or an opportunity that means something to you. As you listen, consider what role might you play in how to make that change a reality that all of us can be positively impacted for, okay? Y'all got those note cards? Y'all ready? I'm gonna take that silence as a big resounding yes. All right, I wanna introduce our panel. I'm gonna start with Amanda Brown, she, her, the CEO of AB Livewell. Thanks for being here.
Yes, thank you, everybody. As Roxanne said, I'm Amanda Brown. I'm the founder and CEO of Amanda Brown Livewell. We do a lot of community work with nonprofits and city entities. We take projects from ideation to implementation and expand them. And we also do training on advocacy as well. So those are our two bread and butter services, but we are way more integrated in the community and love making a difference, mostly around anti-violence practices, gang prevention, anti-human trafficking. We're starting to do some work with the LGBTQ community, so that's a little bit about who we are.
Beautiful, thank you. And next up we have Jacob Duarte, he, him, community organizer, community organizing and power building strategist at the San Diego LGBT Community Center. Jacob.
Yes, I work here, and it's really a privilege to work here. This is actually my first time ever working outside of government. Prior to this, I had worked locally with the County Board of Supervisors under the former chair, the State Assembly with David Alvarez, and both chambers of Congress with Congressman Scott Peters and Senator Dianne Feinstein. I wanted to work here because although I had the institutional experience, what I lacked was the community organizing tools and knowledge. And I think in such a time as this, it's very important to learn. What really gravitated me towards this role, aside from being a member of the community myself, was that when I look at the history of marginalized people in this nation, it's the queer community that has had the most amount of progress in the shortest amount of time. In the 1950s and 60s, we could have been institutionalized, put in a sanitarium for being homosexual. Fast forward to 2020, and you have Pete Buttigieg openly running for president. How did we get there? Organizational tools that took us from the fringes of society to now a real political force, and I wanted to contribute to that.
Thank you for that. Okay, and our final panelist, Mekayla Nariño with Reimagining Our Future San Diego, she, her. Welcome.
Yes, hi everyone. Yeah, as Roxanne shared, my name is Mekayla. I'm the creator of Reimagining Our Future San Diego, based in North County. We do a lot of mutual aid throughout Escondido, San Marcos, and Vista, as well as political education and community-related events, whether that's art, social, all those good things.
Beautiful. And even though we have microphones, I'm going to ask us to use our loud voices because while they might be able to hear you for these speakers, I may not be able to hear you even though I'm sitting right here. Sound good, y'all? All right. Thank you so much. I want to begin with you, Jacob. Each of you can point to a moment when you realized waiting for someone else to solve a problem wasn't enough. What was that moment, and what did it teach you about the role that ordinary people can play in creating change?
Well, to me, politics is all about making sure the next generation receives a better world than the one we inherited. And I have a military brat background where, although I was born in San Diego, I lived all throughout the United States and actually spent a majority of my years in the South. So I saw communities from coast to coast struggle. I've attended public schools where the bread was so hard it would clatter if you dropped it on the tray. And originally, when I started my career, I thought I was going to become a clinical psychologist because I knew I wanted to help people. And although a psychologist has a bond that's very intimate with their patient that very few politicians can create with their constituents, I was willing to sacrifice that for a greater canvas. Legislators can change the lives of people on the community level, state level, and even national, depending on which office they hold. For me, that moment was on May 2nd, 2010. I was living in Millington, Tennessee, and a flood had wiped out a majority of the town. Depending on where you were either 5 to 12 feet underwater. And luckily, my family had insurance. We were able to recover from that. But my fellow peers that I went to school with they had no social safety net. And I would hear them say, my family lost everything. And that really stuck with me. What I witnessed taught me more about politics than any textbook ever could. In the aftermath, I saw how communities came together and took care of each other. Working class people looking out for working class people before any type of government response was even formed. And when I got older and looked back at that experience and that disaster, I realized that it was all political, every layer of it, from the climate conditions that created a once-in-a-100-year storm, to the crumbling infrastructure that was never invested in, to the emergency response and the housing and forced displacement. All of that were reflections of decisions made by those in power. And more importantly, it taught me that you must do politics, otherwise politics will do you.
So it's been a series for me of different moments throughout my life, and I think that looking at others to solve problems is a continuous journey for me personally. And I think the biggest moment that stands out for me is when I was in one of my first flagship contracts, No Shots Fired. Some of you know what that program is. And there was a lot more to it than I thought. It was just about a great gang prevention program coming from the community, going into the political realm. And I was like, what is all this contention? We had a lot of contention in the first 2 years. I was like, all we're doing is coming in here trying to make a big difference. And there was one moment, it was about 2 years in, after a lot of frustration and just, like I said, a lot of contention, where I was like, oh my gosh, no one else is gonna repair this, and people are just gonna continue to talk about it and talk about the frustrations. I need to get in there, build relationships, repair this, and be the ones, for lack of better terms, being the one to go to city council and make an appearance at budget hearings. And through that, I was able to see a lot of great success. There was one year where we were about to get funding cut, eliminated in the city. And it was because I was out there, being the one at that budget hearing that it got reversed. So there's a lot of different moments like that for me, and I'm always growing in that space, actually, because there's always this sense of, oh my God, can't someone else do it, right, with my own humanity? It's like, do I still have to be that person standing up and doing this? And I have to really check myself, because there are a lot of people doing that, and I've found a way to advocate for things to build relationships versus putting it on someone else. So I can share more about that, but I would say that was the one moment in my career that helped me elevate what I wanted to do with all of these trainings and the programs. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say for me, so I was always passionate about social justice, but I didn't really start organizing until undergrad at UC San Diego, and I joined Mecha's Mesa Directiva, and I learned so much, and it was amazing. But then I moved back home in North County my second year forward, and I was a commuter. And I was just so frustrated because I'm like, okay, all of this amazing work is happening, and I'm learning so much, and we're amazing. But we have a lot of shared issues and experiences and struggles in North County. Where are we doing it? Where do we go? Where do we find each other? And I was expressing this frustration with my friends, and they were like, yeah, and they're like, I can't drive an hour out to do that. And also, why, when right here in our neighborhood, we also have these shared experiences. So it was my third year. I had a classmate, and I saw her post on Instagram. Her and her friends, they just posted up at the park, and they had free signs with clothes and books and hygiene items. And I was like, you can do that? That's so cool. And I love to see. And by the end, everything was gone. And I was like, wait, we should do that. So that's why I started Reimagining Our Future SD, to create a space where we could come together and ideally plant these seeds together for the inspiration and action. And in doing so, then I was able to meet and have conversations with folks where I'm like, wait, this work has been happening. I just haven't been able to see it or access it. So then building those connections with one another and that solidarity, and then seeing how we can show up for one another in those spaces in North County. So that's how it started, and I'm so grateful for, again, those seeds over time.
Thank you all. So what I'm hearing in that is when each of you individually and then collectively start to see your lived experience as eye-opening moments for where change might be possible, and leaning into that change rather than it becoming a barrier for you to engage in some kind of work. I also know that we work and live in systems where we are expected to believe that the experts in the institutions hold the solutions, like the hero leaders, that will have one person who's going to be able to solve these problems, yet all of the work that you have named in your experiences and your roles begins within the community itself. So when we start to believe that we as a people closest to the challenges and often furthest from power hold the seed for the change, how do we carry that forward into the community so that they can continue to participate? And I'd love to begin with you, Amanda.
I don't think this is a black and white, one solution fits all answer. And I know for me personally, it's really been putting myself as a liaison. So the projects that we get hired for, I'm not necessarily always hired to do that and build bridges. My contracts usually are to help run programs. However, I naturally put myself in the middle of the ecosystem and say, okay, how is this project or program working with all of the relationships in the city? And so with navigating those different spaces and starting, I firmly believe that by building relationships, people will come and use their voices in the community. And I'll go back to No Shots Fired because it's a great example of, in those first 2 years, I mean, this is a program where you have ex-gang members, they have a lot of history, they've restored their lives, they're doing great work in the community, but there's gonna be those triggers, there's gonna be those traumas that come up, we're telling them to partner with the police department. It's gonna come up. We're telling them to partner with county and city, and it's gonna come up for them. It's inevitable. And so by me growing and building those relationships, having them feel safe to then bring up their voices, I mean, I've seen it. When we started doing that after the 2-year frustration, when we started to actually build those relationships, then one by one, they started coming to the city hearings. They started to really participate. And so I think with a movement like this, it's called the Credible Messenger Movement. I think with a movement like that, with that project, it really it's such a dance because I want to empower individuals to go do it, but sometimes they're like, nah, like you got to go talk to the police department. And I'm still encouraging them and inviting them along the way. So I really think it takes a lot of courage to put yourself in the center and say, hey, okay, I'm going to deal with all these opinions. I'm going to deal with all of this. And really, I have to take care of myself. But I've seen that work where I'm like, okay, I'm going to help build these relationships. I'm going to keep inviting you into the conversation so that you can also feel like your voice is being heard. I mean, there are people that naturally just do that. And I've seen people shy away because they're just too afraid or too upset to join and have a voice at the table. So that's just one example of what I've seen actually work is, like I said, building relationships and saying, hey, do you want to come? And for 2 years, it was a no. So it's really the persistency as well and not giving up and the encouragement that I've seen really make a difference for people to rise up.
Yeah, what you just named too about people are too afraid and too upset.
Yeah.
And recognizing that is just the daily experience.
It just is, yeah.
It's the normalized. And you then also named part of this work requires you to empower and to encourage them.
Yes.
To be able to take that step forward.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more about how you've lifted that into communities?
Yeah, it's leading by example. It's me showing that I'm willing to do it and willing to put myself out there and in front of all these council members and say, hey, I stand for this program, right? And also, in those private meetings, allowing their frustrations to also come out too, right? I mean, again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not anything, and I have space for their humanity, right? We all have our own humanity. I have space for, and it's not easy. I've had grown men who have been ex-gang members just get super upset with me, like, why are you building these relationships with council? And I'm like, it's important. And so the best way I can put it is giving space for all sides of the table. And I mean all sides of the table. Conservative opinions, liberal opinions, people that have been discriminated, and it's just giving space to have people be able to navigate that for themselves. And then they're like, and I've seen it. I've seen people then be okay with going to meetings and get more involved in the community. Because I can't even imagine, I have fears every day, and I'm not from the streets, right? And I was having this conversation with someone yesterday who used to be in the West Coast Crips, and I was like, I just can't even imagine what you're going through. Like your fears, I'm not even from the streets, and I have my own fears. So, you take that for someone who hasn't been from the streets, and you triple that on there, it's like 10 times the fear. From what I've seen. I could go on and on about this, but I think I'm hoping I'm answering your question. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Jacob, I want to offer that same question to you, given your political background and the work that you're doing here with the LGBT Community Center. And thank you for bringing some of the dates and the history into the space. What does the work look like when you're thinking about the change starts within the community who are furthest from power?
I want to thank you for bringing up history, because that's really important when it comes to community organizing. I think one of the best tools you have as an organizer and to create change is to be educated, is to understand American history. There's a reason why Trump dismantled the Department of Education, because the system wants obedient workers rather than critical thinkers. And yes, your passion is what drives you, but you have to be strategic. I think of emotion as gasoline, and logic as the GPS. You need both to get to the destination. And when it comes to history, if you were to study it, you will see that those that have been the closest to the problem often hold the key to the solution, whether that was the revolutionists breaking from a monarchy to form a democracy, segregation into integration, abolition and freedom of slaves, oppression of women, the suffragette movement. All of these movements, it was ordinary people who pulled the country back onto its moral axis when it fell off. And it's our job to carry that lineage forward. It is too clear It's our responsibility to clear the path so that wisdom already present can rise and lead, because oftentimes it's the communities that hold the answers already. We don't need any type of outside opinions telling us our lived experiences and our reality. One of my favorite examples of this would be the labor movement. The labor movement did not win by trying to appeal to the morale of the factory owners. They won by making sure that the cost of exploitation was higher than the cost of compromise. The suffragettes similarly did similar type of organizing when they organized consumer boycotts alongside their political campaigns, targeting the economic interest of the men who needed their votes. In both cases, clarity was the fuel, but economic disruption was the engine. That's not ancient history, that's the blueprint.
So if the community already holds the important knowledge, how does that knowledge become power? And I'm curious if you want to offer something up for that, Mekayla.
That knowledge becomes power because we are able to feel empowered, that we deserve to be here, that our lived experiences are valuable and important, and that we don't have to rely, and we shouldn't rely on these systems in place because they're functioning exactly how they're intended to. So how are we as a collective coming together to be like, you know what, this is real, this is relatable, how are we coming together to create the world that we want to see? So I think it's that empowering aspect of, okay, I know this and we got this, for sure.
Thank you. So over these last few months, you brought up the city budget that we've all seen what's been playing out. You also talked about going to city council, and we've seen, if you're watching the news, you see a lot of folks going down there and fighting for arts and culture. So if you were down there, thank you. We see you. That in and of itself speaks to something that it starts as a community concern and moves into collective action. And there's plenty of examples across city of San Diego, across our country, across the globe. So in some respect, shifting policy is one vehicle for change. Mutual aid, community organizing, civic engagement, relationship building, as you named, are others. How do you see these approaches working together when communities are negotiating what power looks, feels, and sounds like in where they want that action to move forward? Yeah. How do you see these approaches working together? So thinking about mutual aid, policy, community organizing, civic engagement, and tying that back into the people. What does that look like for when communities are using multiple forms of power at the same time?
Okay, I would say, because initially, at least for me, it's daunting because it's like, what can one person do all at once? And you want to learn and do everything, or at least that's often how I approach it. But one person, we can't do everything, and we don't have to, because again, it's all simultaneous. And as long as we have that foundation as a community of what are our shared priorities and how are we going to approach this and how are we doing our part with the privileges, access, and resources that we have. I think a great example of this on a community organizing aspect is HRCO, the Human Rights Council of Oceanside. They have general body meetings once a month. Anyone can go, and they have updates on what each committee is doing, and they also have an educational aspect. So then folks that maybe don't have the time to join a committee can still participate and see how can I support in a different way, whether that's showing up to an event, whether that's a Venmo donation, or reposting the flyer. And then the committee, they have an education committee, culture, community patrol, and propaganda. So with education, they're going to the Ocean Unified School District. How are you protecting our migrant children? How are you protecting our Black and brown children in the school, on campus, outside of the school? So then folks, maybe they're like, oh, I have experience in education, or I have no problem speaking at the board meeting and speaking to the folks there, and that's their strength, and that's how they show up. And then with the patrols, twice a week, they drive around Oceanside, so maybe that's how they're able to. Maybe they're an early bird and they like to drive and they got it, and that's how they can participate. And then propaganda is just printing out Know Your Rights material and wheat pasting it across Oceanside, handing it out to folks, making sure folks know how to access those resources and what they mean. So I know there's one person, she goes to the library every week and she prints out those copies. So when it comes to those days where they disseminate all the information, she's got a stack ready to go. So then it's cool because everyone's participating and it's all simultaneous and it works together to achieve those priorities that are discussed. So that's one great example that I enjoy.
So you started to touch on what I was going to say, and I want to say this boldly, is it's not about going to city council once a year. And I know some people are going to hate that. Jean-Louis, you know this. He's a fellow advocate. Love you. There's so much effort and energy. And you've got to stay plugged in throughout the year. Like you said, you know, what every day this woman's printing something out or every week. It really takes that effort. And you got to stay plugged in not only on a city level and a community level. If you really, really, really care and want these shifts, plug into your state coalitions, plug into your national coalitions. You know, I've done a lot of work around flying to different areas. And I'm not saying everyone can do that or has the resources to do that, but to really be knowledgeable and become like a subject matter expert. And I think community members have more than they think, like more power, right? It's just about building these relationships ongoing, every single day, every single week. And I would say, ask yourself, are you willing to do that, right? And it's okay if not, and if not, be okay with whatever is happening, right? I see it all the time where, I am going to go back to the once a year city council. I see it every single year where people go and they get so upset once a year. Where we've found a lot of progress, like I said, you got to get ahead of that. If you're surprised by the budget that's coming out, you haven't done your homework. People are not going to love this, but you got to do your homework. You got to go to city council and say, hey, what are your priorities? What are you actually putting out? And you're allowed to ask them those questions. You know, go to the mayor's office. And that's, I think, a misperception that people feel like they can't do or request that. And again, it takes a lot of courage. It's taking me years to actually, I still get nervous doing it, right? And we have a contract with the mayor's office. But it really takes, and talk to people about it, right? There's the CBA that Jean-Louis used to run, and that is an ongoing relationship, you know, coalition of folks that go and build relationships. But it's not going to happen once, and it might take years. That's the other thing too, is if you want a shift to be made, right? The movement that I am really proud of, and again, we do work in different spaces, but the credible messenger movement around this premise of, you know, criminally impacted individuals now making a difference in the community. It's not a new thing. It's been happening since like the 1960s, 70s. It's just now becoming publicized because people are making it a bigger splash, a bigger movement, because people are out there. And I've seen these national groups. It's because the national groups are going around the country, you know, engaging with people on a higher level. I think that shows real power. And then knowing who your partners are at the legislation level, right? Like, I don't do legislation. I'm not a lobbyist, but I do know in the state of California, the lobbyists that go and advocate for funding for what we're looking for. So it's complicated and it takes a lot of effort. And I'm not everywhere I want to be with this. I want to build more and more relationships throughout the country. But from my experience in the past 5 years, it's really that ongoing, stay connected, and don't feel afraid to ask for help, and really look for others to build that with as well. Right? Find a community of people that are doing the same thing, and you're gonna have to do your research and really get out there. So I might be a little controversial with this answer, but that's what I have to say.
Love a good controversy. So what you're naming too, did you want to Okay. Well, what you're naming is really connected to when not just individuals are going and tapping in, but when you're creating partnerships within the community, coalitions,
100%, yeah.
where communities are starting to not only just care for one another, but to then start to organize together in the different partnerships. And once communities have identified the priorities, have begun organizing around them, how do those priorities then move into decision-making spaces? And what does that journey look like? And within that, here's that layer.
Yeah.
We know that there's conflict, even amongst communities.
Every day, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, not a black and white answer. What I've seen, God, I don't mean to be redundant, but it goes back to the same thing for me is building those relationships and having someone who knows about policy. So for example, there is a statewide coalition that I'm on called CalVIP. It's through it's called BSCC. It's like the California State Board of Corrections. They have monthly meetings where I can go and hear about policy that then I can take back to on a city level, and then again I'm not a policy legislation expert, but it really goes back to tapping in and knowing what your subject is on a national level, state level, and then citywide level. And I think that in itself can have you be knowledgeable to shift changes. Hey, here's California. Do you know what they're doing over in, I don't know, Oregon? Here's this policy. What about us, institutionalizing it here and then bringing that up to different community members? But it's the same answer for me, honestly. It's knowing, because that gives you more confidence too. Right? If you just want a policy shift on your own or maybe with a local group, maybe having that backing on a statewide level to say, hey, this is what they're doing on a statewide level here. This is what they're doing in the city over. Look at these incredible results. How can we implement it here? So it goes back to the same thing for me, is knowing your stuff nationally, knowing your stuff citywide, knowing your stuff statewide, so you can have that confidence to say, hey, there are other places doing this and it's successful. Why don't we implement this policy here? Because you can't argue that, right? If a city council member is saying, well, that's stupid, that's never gonna work. Well, actually, it does work over here and it works over here. Let me educate you. Let's work together on this. And it goes back to that conflict, right? When people hear a no or hear something that they don't necessarily like, that tests everything for a human. You're like, and I've been there. It's like, what do you mean? This is the move to do. Let's restore humans as a whole. Let's not punish them. No, we don't need to do harsher punishments. Like, what do you mean? Right? And you can create your own conflict, but it takes a lot of emotional intelligence and courage to say, okay, that person doesn't have the policy I want. That person doesn't even understand what I'm trying to do. Where are they at? And let me see if we can find a way to talk about this. And where are they coming from, right? Like, police are trained in a certain way, and I had to wrap my head around that and start building that relationship. Oh my God, they're trained a certain way. And there's some incredible police officers that we partner with now. We've had some crummy relationships, and I still even had to check myself. I was like, okay, where is this person coming from? Maybe they witnessed some terrible crime fight out there that I'm unaware of, and it looked really terrible, and now they're just thinking all gangsters are awful, right? And so that's where the conflict, and it is the hardest thing. It's the simplest thing is like, let's listen and understand. No, you got to really take the time to check your beliefs, it's a whole, it takes a lot of energy, and I've had to learn that the hard way in the fire, but it was the best lesson to learn. So yeah.
Thank you, Amanda. And I want to ask the same question of you, given your background as community organizing and power building, the strategy piece of it.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognize that all these different strategies aren't parallel tracks. They're a feedback loop. And oftentimes, grassroots organizing emerges from policy failures, and then in turn, it reshapes what policy believes is possible. When the question had asked, what does it look like, I thought of a historical example, of course, and I thought of the Black Panthers free breakfast program.
Yes.
That was a community need that refused to wait for the government to respond. And in doing so, they influenced the government to implement the National Free Breakfast Program for students. And I'm going to read off this because I have some important dates that I want to get correct. Each approach informs the others. Mutual aid receives the gaps. Community organizing names who is already doing the work and where the connective tissue is missing. Relationship building creates the trust and makes sustainable action possible. Civic engagement translates all of that energy into accountability. And when we are all working together, the result is not just advocacy, but an independent community and infrastructure, which is precisely what makes those in power nervous. Under the COINTELPRO, a covert FBI operation ran from the 1950s through the 1970s and was used to surveil and dismantle Black liberation organizations from the inside. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover identified the Panthers Free Breakfast Program and community health clinics as a greater internal threat than their politics. The reason for that was straightforward. A community that feeds itself, heals itself, and educates itself does not need to beg the state for anything. That kind of self-sufficiency is threatening to any system that depends on dependency. The government did not adopt the free breakfast program out of generosity. It adopted it because ignoring a program that effective would become a political liability. And it's often rural areas that rely heavily on grassroots structures just to simply survive because they don't have the urban infrastructure that cities do. And the challenge, of course, whether you're in a city or in farmland, is to make sure that laws are, the challenge, of course, is to make sure that what is solidified remains stable in a fragile world, because right now what gets codified can easily be repealed, and we're living through a very sharp reminder of that under the Trump administration. And to your point, relationship building between governments and the people can still function as it's meant to, especially here in California, given that we're a progressive state. We have to take advantage of that. We have to take advantage of the fact that in a blue state such as ourselves, it's much easier to make sure that our communities are leading our political figures rather than the other way around. If we do not, it does not sustain itself, we sustain it.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you taking it back into the Black Panther movement and speaking to that, and even thinking about more currently too, all of us, y'all remember COVID? Remember this pandemic that we all navigated through? And thinking about what happened in our schools when immediately had to go into online teaching, and thinking that that was going to be an easy transition, and making a lot of assumptions that institutions and systems make about what folks have access to, and communities not all having internet, yet needing that for online. Many of our kiddos get their breakfast and lunch at school, so then what happens there? And I'm connecting that back into what you're naming, that it was the community that organized to make those things happen.
Yeah, and throwing it back to the pandemic, it's also the teachers that identify child abuse.
Yes, 100%. And so there's, throughout history, and we're in the midst of history making in this moment, there are some hard-won victories. And I'm thinking about, how do we honor those lessons? How do we carry those lessons and those struggles forward while creating space for new leaders, new ideas, new approaches to emerge when things are constantly shifting and coalitions are losing funding and still are finding a way? How do we tether our histories to what is coming and what is available? Start there, and I'd love to come to you too, Mekayla.
I think you have to honor your history by recognizing the shoulders of the people that you stand on, the organizers who came before you that have done the work to get you to where you are now. But I also think it's a responsibility of the elders to pass on their knowledge. And I think a lot of movements get stalled when elders, rather than passing the baton, almost gatekeep that information because they do not trust the next generation to build or to lead. I think that what they should do instead is give that baton, and it's not necessarily giving it away. It's making sure that when you're running together, none of it falls apart. and having that sense of creativity, where it's the younger generation's responsibility is to integrate the current reality into their strategy, because they are living in a particular moment that no other generation before them has full knowledge of what it means to walk around and to exist in this type of climate as a young person. So the older folks need to pass along their wisdom, and the younger folks need to integrate creativity into that wisdom. The world is changing, whether that's AI changing the entire infrastructure of our economy, new breakthroughs in research and science, or climate change, for example. We have to adapt, and that's your responsibility as a young person that's living in the present moment.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, just thinking about how do we honor the lessons and the struggles, you know, that have come from history, recognizing history does repeat itself, it's cyclical.
Yep.
How do we tether those histories to what is coming in our new leadership, new ideas, new struggles?
Yeah, I would say getting involved is for me, a long game approach. So like you said, it's both education on our part and then requesting for that education to be passed along and not assuming that someone's going to do it, right? And I've had to learn that as well, as, you know, show me what you know about your expertise, and you've been doing this I'm usually the youngest person in my field, I don't know why, I just like 30, 20 years, and so it's really being humble to say, hey, I'm gonna learn from you and not think that I have all the answers, because I wake up and I think I have all the answers, y'all. I'm not, you know, my own humanity is like, yeah, I know this, and it's like, no, Amanda, you actually don't know this. And so it's actually recognizing that for yourself is, I think, can uplift it. And one thing that I want to mention too, and it's so counterintuitive to, I think, us as humans, is slowing things down. There's a blizzard of information that comes at us on a daily, hourly, like even 30 minutes. You know, if you look at your phone, maybe in the next 5 minutes, you're gonna get like 1,000 things coming at you. And I think a way to do it is, again, educate yourself, be humble enough to ask people before you, you know, what's actually happening. It goes back to relationship buildings, know your stuff on a national level, local, statewide, and really taking the time to slow down. I've seen things that people get really quick, we gotta fix this right now. And yes, however, I think, and I've seen it with violence, if we take the time to slow down, right? Because you think of violence, it's so reactive, and people are moving so quick. So if we can slow down ourselves and say, what's the long-term game here? What do we need to do to be really intentional? And I've been there, you know, you can ask my fiance, I just want to like move quick and like fix the world. And I have to really look at, okay, and it's a practice, I gotta practice it. I sit and I'm like, okay, what's the long term? How can I see building blocks now to be intentional? Because that's palpable, then people can think and breathe with all the information coming at us. There's 1,000 opinions out there. More than like 1 million, you know what I mean? So we gotta slow down sometimes and be intentional. Yeah.
Yeah, similarly, I would say creating those intentional spaces for dialogue and also leading with that humility, because thanks to their labor of love, we're in the position that we're in now, and that's something to acknowledge and respect, but simultaneously feeling empowered to take up space and do our part in how we see and share together as well. I think a great example of this I've seen is with Sowing Seeds of Dignity in Oceanside. They're a relatively new collective, and there's folks participating, elders, folks in politics, and even high schoolers, and they come together to talk. How are we gonna address that our community members are being kidnapped in broad daylight every other day? What are we gonna do about this? And they've created demands, they've gone to the city council meetings, and then even right now they're working on creating a cohort. How are we gonna empower our youth to learn these skills and then bring that back to the fields that they're in? So if that's not necessarily policy, they can still bring that in education or in any other field that they're in or pursuing, because this lens and these skills are, again, valuable wherever we are. And and organize together. Yeah.
I really appreciate you naming empowering youth and listening to those voices, because we as adults so often practice adultism, thinking we have all of the answers when we're the ones that can't even figure out what the right question is to ask. But somehow we have all of the answers, and each time I work in school districts, and so I spend a lot of time wanting to just lean in and let them lead, you know, because there's so much more that we can learn when we really just allow for people's true voices to be heard. And speaking of that, I've got some good questions here. Thanks, y'all, for these. What does caretaking look like after a movement, coalition, policy decision does not succeed the first time, or the second, the third, the fourth? What does caretaking look like?
Caretaking, that's oh my gosh. I really believe that you have to set yourself up for your mind, body, and soul. I mean, it starts with that. I've made the mistake in my early career where I was starting off this work and I was, you know, doing work here, and then I was flying up to Portland. I was contracted with the Office of Violence up in Oregon, and then I was flying back here, and then I was going there, and I was just like, and it was failing up in Oregon, and there wasn't as much restorative policy, and then I was flying back here, and I was dealing with that whole budget stuff that I shared with you, and I just was not taking care of myself, and I was starting to get a little frantic, and things weren't working, and I had to have the courage and vulnerability to reach out to, right? It starts within and noticing and recognizing when you're on the grasp of burning out, and having really solid people around you. I think it's so important to set yourself up with your social circles and your personal circles and have great relationships and mend those relationships. I do a lot of work with that on my own, with my own mentorship. So I have my own mentor as well, and really surrounding myself, right? Because I can get real lost in my work real quick, like very lost. Like I don't, you know, when I was doing the Portland thing, it was like, I don't even know if I was taking a day off. And so the caregiving piece of it, especially when something's failing over and over and over and over again, right? We've built in the Credible Messenger movement specifically, did so much incredible work to be nationally recognized, and then Biden was about to, resource it with billions of dollars. And it was just all taken away in a moment. And I've seen people quit. You know, some really great leaders in the movement just quit because I could tell they just weren't pausing and taking care of themselves. I'm still here because I've learned from, again, flying back and forth and not taking a break in space, but I've had really great people around me to uplift me when I've needed it. And it's real, I'm telling you, if I didn't have that, I'd probably quit too. You gotta take care of yourself and your social circles. As cliche as that sounds, I know we always say take care of ourselves, but it's the truth, right? And setting yourself up personally, where you're not going, to a circle that's just complaining about everything. And again, I'm gonna be the controversial one here, right? You just need to have people that plug you in, not want to just complain about the world and problems and people quit about that, and I've seen it, and I could probably talk about this for a while, but I've been on both sides of the coin. And it's just unfortunate, right? Because we need those strong voices, especially with right now, we have a lot. We basically have to not start from scratch, but it was a big hit. It was a big hit federally for this movement, and we need people to lean into that. But unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people quit because they're not taking care of themselves, and it's it's sad, but yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. How do we begin to shift the narrative of how people view their relationship and responsibility with politics and civics? Who wants to take that one on?
Okay, yes, I love this question because everything is political. Like the personal is political. Literally, the air we breathe, the food we eat, the school we go to, the zip code we're in, it's all connected. So I think making sure that we have these open conversations and also continuing to educate ourselves and each other to make those connections. Because initially it can seem like if I'm not in city council or congressperson, like I don't know anything about politics, or it has nothing to do with me or it's out of my control, when that's not the case. So how are we gonna connect these dots with one another to then not only understand it, but then, okay, what are we gonna do about this? And how am I gonna use the privileges and access and resources that I have and that we have to approach that? And I think once we make that change the framework, then, or at least for me, it's like I'm activated, like I'm ready to go. So, yeah.
Thanks, Mekayla. I'll offer this question to you, Jacob. What new strategy or strategies do you wish could be better implemented across San Diego communities to impact change?
Whether it's San Diego communities or just nationwide, economic strategies. I really think that people need to start weaponizing their money. And when you look back at American history, that's what's been the most effective. Lincoln, when he announced the Emancipation Proclamation, that wasn't done out of good conscience. That was done to cripple the Southern economy so that way they couldn't fuel their war. When it came to the Civil Rights Movement and the Montgomery boycotts, the reason why they allowed integration on the buses is because that boycott went on for 18 months and it almost drove the Montgomery broke as a city. So I think that people, whether we need some type of large organized movement where people weaponize their finances, because that's what keeps the system alive, is when you participate in it through your money. What I would love to see one day, what I think every organizer should do, is a nationwide protest where we don't pay our taxes because we don't feel represented. There was a study that was done in Harvard where it said that public influence on public policy is less than statistically significant. How is that representative at all? And so that's what I would like to see going forward, is people, especially labor, withholding their funds from the system. It's the life force of it. Just cut it off.
Well, we saw it worked with Target.
Yeah, exactly.
Y'all not shopping at Target, right? Okay, I digress, but yes, firm believer in that. Okay, our final question. It's most community members with lived experience that rarely get involved in the government process. When the outcome of a legislation or advocacy effort, as often doesn't always land with full justice for them, how do you hold them together and encourage them to continue to engage?
Can you repeat that question?
Mm-hmm. I'll shorten it. So thinking about folks with lived experience where often legislation or a new policy or something needs to change, and so often doesn't always land with full justice. How do you hold them together and encourage them to continue to engage? And I think each of you have connected to that it's the long term. I'm connecting that question even into there was a question here specific about self-care when you're hitting a wall. How do we stay grounded in what we know to be possible, because history has told us, right? So I think that's it, is here's my answer for it, is staying grounded in my ancestors' freedom dream, in thinking that what we're seeing right now was somebody's dream of what was possible 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I mean, I remember voting for marriage equality, and now that we just, like, it's just this thing that people just get married, and we know that people are trying to take that right away, but that wasn't a reality for many people for so long. And so I think for all of us is to just recognize there is power in community, there is power in collective action. When we are feeling depleted, find your people, take care of yourself, stay grounded in possibility, and most importantly, find joy in the little moments.
Yeah, enjoy the ride.
I have something. Yeah. Thank you. You sparked something for me. So you talk about the possibility, right, of your ancestors and then the long term. It's also, yes, taking care of yourself. and creating a big enough why for yourself and a big enough game of when, shit hits the fan and you want to quit and you want to run, why were you there in the first place, right? I can't really explain it for me. I just want healthy communities, right? I mean, most people do, but I have it in such a way that I like in my bones just don't want to see people picking up guns and fighting each other. It's just, I just can't wrap my head around it. And so that's what keeps me going, right? And like just the health of communities and people doing things because I take the time to look at like, why is this person doing what they're doing with their humanity, right? And giving, I'm sometimes have a terrible time giving my own self when I'm in this space and I'm acting a certain way and I'm like, oh my God. And then my fiance is like reminding me like, you're human too. So, but it's really, it's back to like, you got to create a big enough why. Or else when things get hard and you want to quit, like the lived experience experts that I work with, it's like, yeah, I've had a lot of people around me, and it's like we got to keep going. This is such a bigger game, Go take a beat, go take a couple of days off, right? And I really stand in that as like a presence, and so, you got to find your why. Thank you for that, and it's got to be really compelling to you, right? And it's not just like, oh, we want peace on the planet. No, it's like, okay, but why does that matter to you? Right, and everyone has that. So taking the time to write that out for yourself or share it with people is one of the most powerful things you can do too. Yeah, cool.
I would say what comes to mind for me is accessibility and making it accessible. So what time works for most folks to meet? How are we going to break down the language? And so when you're in the meeting, you actually know what they're talking about and not completely lost. And also feeling like I deserve to be here and I feel entitled to be a part of this process and to participate in the collective demands of our shared communities. I feel like that's definitely the shift that's needed.
Thank you. All right. So my final question, y'all, and I'm connecting this into the freedom dreaming, thinking about Adrienne Marie Brown, who talks about Afrofuturism and this beautiful notion that Harriet Tubman had a dream about freedom, and that many of us are now fully experiencing. So that was her freedom dream that we just live our lives now. And so I want to ask each of you to consider what your freedom dream would be for San Diego, to imagine what in 5 years from now, the communities in San Diego that you serve that are meaningfully shaping the decisions that affect all of our lives, what does that future look like for us? And what is the role that those of us in the room are playing to help create it? You got the mic, so why don't you start?
No, I love the idea and practice of dreaming and imagination because it's so important and that's something we deserve to exercise and ponder on and not feel like we're limited to what currently exists, because just because this is what's visible doesn't mean that's the limit, and it definitely should not be. My dream in 5 years for San Diego is that folks are active participants in their communities and they have shared priorities and they know how to participate. They know where to go and who to talk to and how to be a part of that process, and that their voice is heard, and again, that everyone has a role in it, because we really do, and that we're able to take up that space. And I would say a way to get started, I think, talk to our neighbors. Like, do we know our neighbors' names? I feel like most folks don't, and like this is something I also need to practice as well. And beyond the name, maybe it can be, this week I'm gonna cook a crazy amount of food so everyone has their lunch, and the next week you got it and we pass it down. Or maybe emergency preparedness. I have everyone's phone number and I know where to find important documents for your medication or emergency contacts for their family. That can be a great start in that, I'm here for you, you're here for me, we're practicing this reciprocity and can count on one another, because that's so important. So yeah.
Freedom dream, you said, for San Diego in 5 years from now?
Real easy question.
Yeah, super easy. I mean, I think I'm in this career again for the long term, so people can really talk to each other. I mean, again, it's like very simple, and it doesn't happen, right? I deal with people that get really upset, and I'm like, well, have you gone to talk to them? Well, no. Well, okay. Well, let's do that. It's like I could share more, but it's that simple for me. It's that simple for me that people can start realizing that they can go to city council, that they can go build these relationships, and it might not happen right away, right? So I would love people to build the support systems around them, or the stamina, the courage to keep going after it, week after week, month after month. And it's not easy, right? It's really just not. And I'd love people, in 5 years to start thinking about long term. We're all gonna make mistakes. And if we can start creating solutions that are longer term, and I really firmly believe that it happens with conversation, whether it's one-on-one or publicly like this, but have those tough conversations. Because I've seen it ease violence, I've seen it shift people's perspectives. I've worked with people that just in a conversation alone, they're taking action and they feel better about something. I've really seen it. So I'd love more people to believe that that's a solution, right? I think people also get super complex. Like if we just build this park over here, which is important, right? People need spaces to go, but if they're just saying, if we only build this park, then all of our problems are gonna go away. People need to see the whole of it and see that in conversation. Yeah, that's a beautiful park. That's gonna be great. But if you're still frustrated about X, Y, and Z, what's the next thing that you're gonna be upset about? So that by getting in rooms and talking, having tough conversations is a way to solve whatever you're passionate about. And I've seen it with my career in violence. Yeah.
As a resident of Imperial Beach, I would hope that in 5 years from now, the sewage bill is cleaned and fixed. That, all jokes aside, that one actually isn't a joke. It's a public health emergency that has been neglected for decades, and it's a reflection of which communities San Diego prioritizes and which communities it doesn't. And so I would like to take a moment to publicly recognize and thank the Office of Supervisor Paloma Aguirre for being one of the leading fighter on that issue, when so many haven't. The same is true for Barrio Logan. For decades, residents there have lived in the downwinds of industrial facilities, shipyards, and freeway corridors that have blanketed that community, in particular diesel emissions. The consequences have been predictable and measurable. Chronic asthma rates in Barrio Logan were among the highest in the county, disproportionately affecting children who had no say in where they were born or the air that they breathe. 5 years from now, that is no longer a background condition that gets acknowledged in a report and then filed away. It is a crisis that has been named, resourced, addressed, because the community organized around it and demanded nothing less. But in the broader vision, what is different 5 years from now is the relationships between the people and power. Community members are not just consulted after decisions have already been made. They are present at the beginning when the problem is being defined, when the options are being considered, and when the resources are being allocated. Elected officials in this version of San Diego are not leading their constituencies, they are being led by them. Voter turnout has climbed, not because of a single campaign, but because political engagement has become a cultural norm in San Diego, rather than a civic obligation people feel guilty about skipping. The one thing every person in this room can start doing today is showing up to something local. Not a national march, a social media protest, but a city council meeting, a school board session, a neighborhood planning meeting. Learn who makes the decisions that affect your daily life and let them know that you are watching. That is where it starts, and that is where it has always started.
Say drop the mic, but don't, because it's on. But you named so many pieces that just seeing the head nods, recognizing that we are all deeply impacted in some way, shape, or form, whether it's direct or indirect. If we have community members who literally can't walk outside their house because they can't breathe, that is our issue. That is our community issue here. The complexity of community power is that many of us as individuals don't recognize that we have the power. We have the power to create shift, to evoke transformation when we come together as a community. And so it's important for us to continue. I'm not going to assume that y'all are starting today, but to continue to recognize that your voice matters, your presence matters, your life matters, everything about who you are matters, so that we can have a deeply empowered community that is equal, that is equitable, that is full of diversity, that is multifaceted, and just empowered by the deep complexities that many of us hold. And when we start to think about shifting from just somebody should do something about that to what are we going to do about this, and let's go, right? That's when the change is going to happen. That's when we start to see the empowerment and the shift. So I want to say thank you so much. I was taking notes. I really appreciate you taking time to be with us today. Mekayla and Amanda and Jacob, thank you for your time, for your thoughtfulness in being here with us, and for meeting with me earlier this week too, so that we could, coalesce. And thanks y'all for being here. I know we have another session right after this that's going to be led by Jacob, so I want to encourage you to stay so we can see how we put that into some practical application. Sound good? All right, let's give it up for our panelists.